everybody. This is Dan.
And this is Ron.
And this is Elizabeth.
And this is the nominee Questionable Movies, episode 50-something. Middle-aged. We're firmly middle-aged.
Have we reached the point where, numbers no longer matter?
We've reached the point where the podcast is only as young as it feels.
Feels kind of old right now. I don't feel young today.
Yeah, it's not that kind of... I mean, earlier it was nice out, although I don't know if nice weather necessarily makes me feel younger.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the connection there is. But, I mean, no,
there's like a sleepy day. I don't know. But yeah, so today we watched Withnail and I, which is a movie people have been telling me to watch for many years now. It was directed by Bruce Robinson, who is all the actors and director are British. And it was released in 1987, I believe.
Yes, I'm just pulling up our Wikipedia page here for reference, 1987.
And it, for those who have not seen the movie, it's a bit of a cult classic. I believe Criterion picked it up at some point. It's about two guys. They like to drink a lot. They live in a shitty apartment. One of them's named Withnail, and the other one is only named I, which is supposed to represent the autobiographical element of the film, which is the only thing I really knew about it going in, is that it was a guy, the director and screenwriter, was writing about his early life as an actor in London.
69.
Yeah, I think the autobiographical aspect of it is really interesting to me because, man, the director must have had kind of a rough youth.
But it's so apparent because it's very much from this one perspective, from a very long vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a very insular film. When the core three people in the film encounter anyone else, they're it's almost like they're intruding on the movie, and the main characters need to offend them in some way to leave so we can go back to the action.
I mean, I think part of that is it is truly reflective of the sort of state of mind, the toxic state of mind the two main characters were in throughout much of the movie. There's no way that you can really sustain the kind of drugged out alcoholic lifestyle that they had without pretty much treating other people like they're irrelevant to their existence.
Yeah, it was kind of so I guess there's only three major characters in this movie, I would say. There's Withnail, there's the unnamed I, and then there's Uncle Monty, who's Withnail's uncle. There's that bum that's in their apartment a lot that sells him weed, but I wouldn't say he has two scenes in the entire movie, and he's pretty much always there to sort of illustrate a point of
he's kind of the spirit of the late 60s.
Mm-hmm. Especially
I don't know. I kind of got that vibe from him.
See, I thought he was supposed to be here because it's very clearly a movie about the director figuring out he was an alcoholic and turning his life around.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Definitely.
And so it's kind of hard to see most of the characters as anything besides reflections on aspects of his own alcoholism. I feel there's a bit of Fight Club going on here where you could condense all the characters into just aspects of one character.
I mean,
Elizabeth does not agree with me, so I'll give her the floor now.
Yeah. I think that there's a valid point to what you're saying. I definitely do think you could easily make that argument. I think, and I mean, you could kind of look at it as this is, about a man recovering from alcoholism and choosing to turn his life in the right direction. And Withnail kind of symbolizes that alcoholism. But I also think it's a story about someone recognizing that a friendship that they have with someone they really care about is toxic, and the sort of process of leaving that behind.
Well, and that's a huge part of alcohol recovery. First thing,
so it's hard to pull those apart.
When you go into AA, the first thing they tell you is if you're committed to this, don't talk to any of your old friends for 90 full days.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is basically what, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, I guess we'll call him.
Maybe we should mention what the whole arc of the movie is first.
Okay, so you got two guys. They're both alcoholics. They're both probably in their 20s, I'm guessing. One of them's named Withnail. One of them never gets a name. They live in a shitty apartment that's very dirty. They're nominally actors, but we don't ever see them do any acting outside of on a meta level of, obviously we're watching a fictional film. Everybody's acting.
No, but they're getting auditions.
Yeah, but we never see them in any when we see them in a theatrical capacity, it's their, I guess the most theatrical displays we have are whenever Withnail gets into trouble and starts lying about something in a very exaggerated manner.
Right.
And I think the guy who played Withnail did a very good job, because it's very hard to...
Richard E. Grant.
Yeah, it's very hard to do a good job portraying someone acting poorly. And I think he does a pretty good job of that in this movie, because Withnail, you don't get the sense he's actually a particularly good actor.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to bullshit, and it comes out of him, but he's never really convincing.
Withnail.
I don't know. I kind of disagree. I feel like he's very theatrical, but I think part of his issue is that the acting is so because of his alcoholism and his state of mind, the only way that he is really found a way to be an actor is in his own life. And I don't know. I guess that's not really a direct response to what you were saying. He hates himself
and he doesn't want to be himself, so he puts on this incredible, just sort of he constantly creates drama and bullshit to avoid dealing with himself, which is classic alcoholism.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you got these two guys, they don't really know how to take care of themselves, and that's made very evident in the first scene of the movie, where they're trying to make coffee. The one guy's drinking coffee with a spoon out of a cereal bowl. The other guy's trying to get rats out of the sink. They decide we need a weekend in the country. So Withnail goes to his rich uncle, who happens to be gay, and they schmooze him a bit. His rich uncle also happens to be an alcoholic. And yeah, they schmooze him a bit. They get the keys to this vacation house in the country. They go out there. They don't really know what to do with themselves. They get into trouble, and then the uncle shows up and really, really wants to have sex with the unnamed character.
Also, it's important to note that the uncle is played by Richard Griffiths, and he does a stellar job.
Yeah, I thought Monty was the most developed character in the movie, honestly. I think a movie that was more about Monty probably would have been a better movie.
Dan's just slamming this. I personally think it's a great movie, but but you're allowed to not like it. That's totally okay. That's what makes interesting conversation.
I can see this would play really well in England, because the English are obsessed with culture clashes, right? That's the Henry James, that's the main thing he got out of living in England for 40 years, was the basis of all humor is putting the rich and the poor together, the slovenly and the well-kept together, or people from different nationalities together, and then watching the miscommunications. Mm-hmm. That's Daisy Miller. That's literally the entire story, is just the difference between English and U.S. social mores, and the Bostonians, and most of the early Henry James stuff. That's sort of the basis of it. But
so are you drawing a comparison here with? I think I lost the thread here a little bit. Is this city folk versus country folk? Yeah, city folk versus country folk. Old people versus young people. Kind of like when we watched the Lavender Hill Mob, right? All the humor is predicated on this notion of these are well-to-do, respectable, middle-class people running a crime ring, and that contrasts. And I think a lot of the humor in the film is supposed to come out of that contrast. And I am very slovenly and American in my tastes and perceptions, so I never quite warmed up to that sense of humor the way I think some people have. I think that a lot of the humor comes from the absurdity of the situations they keep finding themselves into. There's a few great visual gags in here, for sure. There's them, so they cook their boots because they get cold, and then we see them walking around with bags tied around their feet for probably a good third of the movie.
Also, they get a live chicken from somebody on a farm, and we see them try to butcher this chicken. They butchering a chicken, and there's this great shot of this like disgusting looking dead chicken that they just threw in an oven, and that was great.
Like sitting on its like hind legs.
But yeah, so they drink too much, they get into trouble. The unnamed guy realizes like, oh, I don't actually want to sleep with this fat old guy. Maybe something's wrong with my life.
To begin with, yeah.
Well, he never wanted to, but he wanted to follow the craziness and the drama where it led him until he realized like, oh, okay, this isn't actually what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I think another interesting thing is like we see that they both realize on a certain level when they're in their London flat in the beginning of the movie that like they have dug themselves a hole and are now sitting in this hole basically, and they're both like, all right, we need a break, we need to like get out of this like shithole and have a clear head, you know, in like that sort of British way. The only one who actually takes advantage of that experience is the protagonist. You know, we see him like in the countryside, he starts to kind of, you know, he starts to like find ways of like taking charge, and he starts like taking walks in nature, and like, you know, he's having a moment clearly where he's like kind of having like an introspective experience. But like Withnail is like psychologically not capable of, at least at this particular point in his fictional life, like of like trying to take advantage of that, or of like doing any kind of like significant self-reflection.
It's sort of interesting. It's like one of the only films about alcoholism I've ever seen where nobody gets like visibly maudlin. Like they're all very emotionally in a box. We don't see Withnail, he gets angry, but we don't ever see him get, I mean, I guess like anger is a factor of sadness, but we don't get any real, I mean, I guess like Withnail, we get the sense he's been spoiled by his rich uncle. He's kind of like a no ambition psychopath or sociopath. Right, because like that's kind of a thing I think like with sociopathy, there's a range of like, does the person actually want to do anything?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like how the FBI classifies serial killers. So like Withnail's basically like an underachieving serial killer as far as psychological profiling goes.
Well, he's like utterly self-defeating. Like nothing's ever good enough for him because he doesn't actually want to succeed, because he just wants to feel bad about himself on a certain level. Like we see like he gets that one call for the audition for the understudy, and he refused, you know, he's utterly insulted by the fact that someone would offer him an understudy audition. You know, he can't conceivably, you know, it's ridiculous. Like he can't conceivably take up such an offer. Which is kind of, I feel like one of the central tragedies of the film, at least for me, because I do genuinely think like the character could be a good actor and could have a stage presence, but he's just utterly self-sabotaging.
I mean, he could be like a great ham. I don't think he has the emotional insight or performative range to be a great actor. The character, not the guy playing him.
I don't know. What do you think, Ron?
About Withnail?
Could he make it or not?
No, he can't. No, I think self-sabotaging is a good word for it. I mean, he won't play the understudy for a role. And I wasn't sure if he was livid at playing the understudy specifically for this role or for the person. In any case, you've got to accept those kind of roles before you accept before you become the star.
Right.
So yeah, he's never going to make it.
It's sort of interesting because it ties it in, because like three quarters of the way into the movie, I did not know this was set in 1969. I thought this was set in the 1980s.
It says it at the very beginning of the movie.
Okay, I missed that part, but it seems much more akin to 80s, like in the 80s in English cinema. And interestingly enough, the last time that Elizabeth was actually on the podcast, we were talking about a film that came out of that wave. England was in a really shitty economic position. The kids were all pissed off. That's where, you know, punk rock and everything came from. But there were also this huge wave of like troubled young man movies, I guess. And I mean, like there's some of those in the 60s too, like a lot of those mod movies like Quadrophenia kind of follow that. that kind of template. But it's kind of funny because like it felt very 80s to me. It felt very much like it was about like no future Thatcherite kids, kind of like stars of the roller state disco. And it's kind of funny that you're talking about Withnail being essentially this person who just doesn't want to try because he doesn't see any point in anything. Because that's, you know, the same thing that happens to the guy who's stuck at the roller state disco in Alan Clark's film.
Yeah.
And Alan Clark's early work is like obsessively focused on like Scum, Made in UK. There's a couple other ones. And he made two different, he remade his own movie. So there's two versions of Scum.
Well, I think it is important to note, though, that, like, this movie was supposed to be very much, I mean, like we said earlier, like, it was autobiographical, so it was very much, like, rooted in, like, the late 60s London acting scene. And, I mean, I think, like, that time period, like, had its own, obviously, like, it was an explosive political time period, so I think that probably a lot of young people growing up then might have also felt, like, a little tumultuous, like, albeit in a different way, but, I don't know.
I think like period pieces, it's like science fiction. It's always a framework to abstract the present in some slight way so that you can talk about it more candidly.
But I don't think this is a period piece if it's autobiographical. Like,
it's totally a period piece. If it's set in the 1960s and you got like Jimi Hendrix in the car, and you notice, like, once I knew that it was in 1969, you notice the cars that were on the road and all the shots where they were on the road are not British cars that would have been popular in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. I guess I just mean, like, I feel like with most period pieces, people are not relying on their own memories and personal experience to inform the narrative.
What about like The Pianist?
Well, no, I mean, like, I'm just saying, like, broadly, like, usually it's like, oh, we set this in the 1800s, no one was alive back then, so like, it's not as personal.
Right, I guess it's not that focused on the period that much outside of the music, which was probably 2 times the budget of the actual movie, right? Because we got the 2 most famous Jimi Hendrix songs that aren't Purple Haze, and then the Beatles. Like, that could not have been cheap. Mm-hmm. Like, that the only music you hear in the movie outside of the end credits is like 2 Jimi Hendrix songs and what was the Beatles song when they walk in? I forget.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But
it's While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting because it felt much more 80s than 60s to me.
I just think that's funny, given that it was kind of about the director. But anyway, it's
Why do you think this is a cult classic?
The gay subtext and surface text, 100%.
I think also, like, I mean, it's like a black comedy. That's like, I don't know. I feel like that's a thing. I feel like it's just like such a weird, I don't know. Like, I remember I first saw this back in like 2014, 2015. I was in college. And it definitely like stayed with me just because like Withnail is just like such a character. And like I just remembered everything being dirty and like this sort of like psychological horror aspect of just these 2 bums like unable to clean their dishes. Like, I don't know.
Right. There is like a bathtub scene that probably was an influence on the infamous. Wait, Ron, did you ever see Gummo?
No.
Okay. So there's an infamous scene.
You guys have to do Gummo.
We should, or Julian Donkey Boy. I haven't seen that in forever. That's a great one. But yeah, so there's an infamous scene in Gummo, which is a movie by Harmony Korine from the mid 1990s. That's supposedly Werner Herzog's favorite scene in any movie, but it's this like kid, he lives in like this beat to shit rural development that's supposed to be somewhere in Ohio, I think, but it's outside of Memphis, Tennessee in actuality. And his mother serves him spaghetti in this like filthy bathtub, and there's just a piece of bacon taped to the wall. And you just watch this kid like eat
and a Kit Kat bar or something, like some chocolate bar, and he alternates bites.
He drops the candy bar in the water and then keeps eating it. And
he alternates bites. Like, who does that? Like,
and this was
between the candy and the spaghetti.
Yeah, he keeps switching back and forth.
I've never done that.
Like, oh my god, it's so gross.
I have never done that.
But there was a scene like that in Withnail and I where the protagonist is like taking a bath, shaving, and like eating like a hot dog in this like
Well, he's eating everything
disgusting-
except the hot dog. He hands Withnail the hot dog, and he's like,
Oh,
"I don't
that's
want this
right.
part. You want
Yeah,
it?"
it's like a tease for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. I think the film did a good job of making dirty things look dirty, which is not always something that movies get right.
Making dirty things look dirty.
Right, like think about like Brokeback Mountain, right? You got these two guys, they're out ranching all day, they're working in the mud, they're working in the dirt. Their clothes look better, and like I don't leave my house, their clothes look like much nicer than my clothes have ever looked. You never see a speck of dirt on their face anywhere.
Right.
Like you can understand why they're sexually attracted to each other, but you can't understand how they actually got any farming done.
Oh, you mean dirty like
I mean literal dirt.
not vulgarity.
Not vulgarity, like literally just like shitty things looking shitty.
Okay, I misunderstood.
The scene at the end when like Withnail is like reciting Shakespeare to the wolves, like the feral like one. I mean, they kind of look like wolves. Maybe they were just dogs, but he's just got this bottle in his hand. It's like pouring, and he's just kind of like yelling at these dogs, and there's like no one else in the street. Like that was a pretty iconic moment.
I don't know. I felt like that moment was it wasn't true to the character, because we have all this stuff established with Withnail earlier in the movie that he's jealous, he's spiteful, etc., etc. When his friend gets the lead in this part and he's just sort of like, oh, I'm going to have this wistful, quiet moment and then talk to myself, I feel like he would have been like pissed off, or there would have been some kind of fight between them, because it like Withnail I don't think could have stood to see the other guy succeed, because of the fact that it points out that Withnail has this psychological block against ever helping himself. And to me, that kind of seemed like it was putting this sentimental capper on the relationship that was at odds with the fact that the protagonist, I guess, because Withnail's not exactly the protagonist by the end of the movie, he's putting this kind of sentimental capper on something after trying to make the point that it was ugly for 2 hours.
I don't know. I disagree. I feel like, I mean, I think that's a good point. I do think we get like a taste of his jealousy when he says congratulations.
At the farmhouse.
No, I was talking about like when they're back in the flat.
Oh, okay.
And he gets the lead.
Yes.
We never really see Withnail like directing jealousy or anger in like a really explicit way toward the protagonist.
No, and I felt like that was a point that seemed like inconsistent with alcoholics I've actually dealt with. So like full disclosure, I was like drinking very, very heavily for about 8 months when I got out of college, and I was going to the same bar every night. Basically like, non-functioning alcoholism, and then I moved and then I was fine basically. But yeah, like alcoholics, they get angry or they get sobby. And I guess he gets like a little bit sobby when he's at the farmhouse.
It really depends on the alcoholic. Sometimes they just get stubborn and like kind of stupid, but they don't necessarily get angry. Like I feel like it depends on the person. I mean, it's a good, like maybe that's like an aspect that they failed to develop. It didn't really bother me explicitly, I guess, which is what I feel like it was more like he was trying to hold him back. He was like, no, like have a drink with me.
Right.
Stay here. And I felt like it wasn't really putting like a neat bow on it necessarily. It was kind of more like he's still, I don't know, he's like a suction cup.
I mean, I think the best part of the end scene was when he's holding the bottle and he says, my love is not women, my love is not men, and there's only one thing left in the shot.
That could the alcohol.
Right. And and on that level, I mean, I think a lot of it reminded me of like the Neil Simon Odd Couple.
With neither of them being especially capable, just one was more incapable than the other.
Right, and like the Odd Couple, like if you watch the original movie with Jack Lemmon, it's basically two guys acting like gay stereotypes who can't admit that they're like living together because they're gay. That might be an interesting one to watch at some point in the future. Like I don't know if the sitcom, I didn't see a lot of the sitcom, but the actual movie itself is just sort of like, okay, the reason these guys hate each other so much, but they keep living together compulsively is because the subtext is they're gay. And in this movie, it's like, it sort of pulls the switcheroo of gay subtext. Wait, no, they're both alcoholics and they're codependent with each other because they need each other to get alcohol.
I'm not totally convinced. I think one thing that I like about the movie is that it kind of leaves like their feelings for each other kind of ambiguous.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No. I think that's what that line at the end is supposed to mean.
Which line?
The thing where Withnail saying, like, I'm not in love with women, I'm not in love with men.
But he does say the women line twice, which is not the like actual quote. But anyway, that's
Oh, I could see Withnail being totally in love with I.
Mm.
That's kind of my, like, the first time I saw it, I kind of thought, like, actually it's Withnail who has feelings for him.
Right.
Not the other way around. Like, he like told a lie to the uncle being like, oh, he's in love with me, blah, blah.
The uncle's gay. The uncle is, like, unambiguously gay. Withnail, I think, is so okay, so, like, I'm not going to name this guy, but I had a friend back in upstate New York, and he had a lot of substance abuse problems. And one day he comes up to me on the street and he's panicked and he's like, I think I'm gay. I don't know how I'm going to tell my Jehovah's Witness parents. Mm-hmm. I asked him, like, what do you do? And he says he slept with some random guy he met in a bar to get drugs. Mm-hmm. And eventually, like, I talked it through with him and he's like, wait, no, I'm just a drug addict.
Right.
Like, okay, like, first of all, like substance abuse is not a sexuality.
No, but substance abuse can make you do things and think that you want or like doing the things. And it's also kind of interesting that in both the cases where we see I asserting himself, it's against any kind of homosexual entanglement.
I mean,
like, you basically have a gay panic scene in the middle of the movie. And then at the end, the only way he can grow up and assert himself is to get out of this relationship with Withnail.
That doesn't really mean anything about like his sexuality, though. Like, I think if anything, it means that he's like still trying to figure it out. Like, I like that it's kind of open-ended, you know, like in my opinion, personally, I feel like it kind of leaves you kind of feeling open-ended. Regardless, I still think like this is a relationship between two people who did care about each other, even though it was really toxic and they like shouldn't have been.
I don't get the sense they care. Like, I got the sense that I cared about Withnail. I got the sense that, like, Withnail had a psychological codependent need for I, but I don't think that Withnail actually gave a shit about I outside of the fact that I normalized his drinking habit and behaviors, which is very common with alcoholism.
For one to normalize the other?
Well, like, the whole reason why you don't want to drink alone is because when you're drinking alone, you're looking at your behavior as something that you're doing of your own volition. Whereas, and like, you know, part of the appeal of going to a bar repeatedly is everybody else is living pretty similar, a fairly similar lifestyle to what you are for at least a couple hours a day.
Okay.
Like,
right.
Without I, Withnail is just sort of this sad drunk with like a sadder, drunker uncle.
Mm-hmm. And which is how he ends the movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. That's my take. But
I don't know. Well, we've been talking a lot. Ron, chime in here.
Yeah, keep going. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to make of this. And the thing that I'm wondering about the most is how does this get its cult status? What's so interesting about this movie, or what grabs people?
It seems like one of those movies where it's like, I mean, I think part of it is like the U.S. still having that, like, we're the colonies syndrome. I think, like, U.S. audiences are incredibly forgiving of British comedy.
Yeah, but why this one?
Well, you think about it, like, there weren't, like, in terms of, like, gay subtexts in movies in 1987, like, the only other thing from, like, within a year either side of that I can think of coming out was, like, Mala Noche by not Todd Haynes, Gus Van Sant, and
what's the Keanu Reeves movie?
My Own Private Idaho, but that's 1991, so that's later. Mala Noche is the first Gus Van Sant movie. It's in black and white. That's a great movie. That's like such a good movie. Also, another thing that Criterion picked up.
So what is your thought process there? Like, why are you wondering why it became a cult classic?
I'm wondering about the allure.
Yeah, it's just not that compelling.
Because what?
It's just not that compelling. Or at least I didn't find it that compelling.
I found it enjoyable and kind of quirky. The performances were good, but it wasn't so incredibly quirky or have some element of camp. Well, maybe it did have a lot of camp, or just being so totally out there, or being kind of amateurishly done.
Yeah, the sound mixing on this is some of the worst sound mixing I've ever heard on a movie.
Oh, I was saying that it wasn't amateurish, but okay, maybe.
No.
I'm
or at least like a big commercially released movie. Like we had the compressor on. I was having a really hard time here. Like all the dialogue sounded like very tinny, which I mean is not that uncommon for independent productions. That period. Yeah, I just couldn't understand because people evangelize this movie. Like this is one of those movies where like people that are really into it, and I guess they're like, you need to see this movie, or like you really need to see this movie. And
yeah, Elizabeth, why did I need to see this movie?
I mean,
I'm not asking why would I have wanted to. It's the why do I need to?
I mean, you didn't need to. I just thought it would be a fun movie to talk about on the podcast.
Apparently, I'd been talking about Listomania for the whole time I've known you all. So you've been saying you want to watch
Listomania. I totally got it.
Yeah, no.
I watched 10 minutes of that, and I'm like, yeah. This is like, there's nothing else like this I've ever seen ever. Like, this is fucking bonkers.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is that you had pointed out to me just how much I try to sell people on Listomania, or at least that I bring it up a lot, and so. Elizabeth, for as long as I've known you, you said you want to watch Withnail and I.
I feel like I only really talked about it a couple times in the past few months.
I talked about it beforehand.
Oh, I don't remember that. I think it was more like I forgot about it, and then I remembered it at one point, and then I was like, oh, we need to watch this.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't.
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't like it, I cannot convey to you the reasons why I like it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like trying to get someone to like a piece of art that they don't like.
Well, I mean, you mentioned some of them while we were watching the movie. Like you were very impressed with Richard E. Grant.
I just think he's like incredible, and I just love watching him. He's so compelling for me personally, and also very attractive in a weird way.
She likes guys with big lips and big foreheads.
I'm sorry.
You guys aren't on the video call, but just you can picture what I look like from that, I guess.
Oh my god,
Elizabeth, I'm not trying to. I apologize. I'm not trying to get you to justify the movie for me. I'm hoping.
He's like, I just wasted 2 hours of my life.
Elizabeth, I was rooting for you throughout the movie, and then at the end, I decided I didn't like you as a person.
No, I'm just coming out of this and saying this is a cult classic. This is a known cult classic. And I do remember when it came out. Obviously, it wasn't a cult classic then because it was...
Right. Right. That's so funny. You get that like inner insider. I mean, to be fair, so I don't know. I mean, I watched this, I remember being really struck by it when I watched it in college. And I think just for kind of personal reasons, and my friend and I were kind of talking about those sorts of ways in which it kind of struck us. And so it'd been a number of, it's been a solid 5 years since I've seen it. And watching it again, I still think it's a good movie. And I still think it's one of the more, I don't know, I find it memorable for some reason. I don't know. It's something about the two characters and I don't know. I can't describe it. It's just I mean,
I think in 1987 too, because I don't know if this is a cult film in England, just because I haven't spent any time in England, but seeing a film from England in 1987 would have been a remarkably more difficult thing to pull off than it is now, because commercial movie theaters probably, major movie theater chains probably did not show this movie.
No, this went to art house.
Right, this went to like art houses and then straight to like the video rental stores where things became cult classics. And I think like, I kind of grew up on the tail end of when there was still some kind of like treasure hunt aspect to finding a foreign movie or something. There was this feeling of like, ooh, it like took this extra effort to find this thing. I feel possessive over it, which I think was what led to a lot of things getting cult status from the 80s, particularly because people kind of remember like, oh, this was difficult for me to track down and it didn't look like the other stuff because I wasn't inundated with constant media.
I think that's definitely part of it. Is like, I feel like when I saw it, I had never heard of it before. I had no idea what it was. And then I came out of it being like, wow, that was like really good for just being a random movie that I had never heard of from the 80s. Like, I just like, I mean, I do think part of it is like the Britishness of it, and it's like, it's just so miserable. Like, I don't know, it's just...
Well, and he's so histrionic, and I think part of, because I hated the Withnail character, like full, like I understood the guy was doing a good acting job.
I love the Withnail character. I think he's just like endlessly fascinating. Like,
right, and to me, he just seemed like, because I have like, so I get triggered by histrionic tendencies due to personal history, like lightly triggered, I guess. Like that probably triggers, that's probably my major like emotional trigger in life is like large histrionic behavior for various reasons. And so I just found him like personally, like I actively disliked the character.
Okay.
And like he's not supposed to be likable, but I think he's supposed to have a certain kind of charisma, and that charisma couldn't get through to me probably because I had this personal context I was approaching his performative style and persona from.
mm-hmm.
Right, because he's a drama queen.
Right.
He's a total, and he's one of those people where like, and this is again to the credit of the actor, he gets this like spot on. He's one of those people where he almost doesn't sound convincing as a person when he's speaking as himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get the sense that he's like cobbling together remembered behavior as opposed to just sort of like acting from this established self, I guess.
You mean when trying to talk normally?
Whenever he's interacting with anyone except he goes into this like broad theatrical, like when they first encounter the guy on the farm.
Right.
Or when they encounter the guy in the bar and he's like, oh, my wife is sick and I have a heart condition and right. And it's like he's only really convincing as himself when he's being petty or bitter. Being backstage, I guess you could call it, like Irving Goffman would call it the backstage behavior.
Okay.
To me, at least, it seemed like there was, and granted, there's like social reasons to take on that kind of persona. The president kind of takes on a bit of that persona. Because of the fact that if you don't seem sincere, nobody can read what you're saying with clarity, right? Because like if the person never seems sincere, like even when they're telling the truth, it sounds like they're lying, and even when they're lying, it doesn't sound any different than when they're telling the truth. And that's a lot easier to pull off in an unconvincing fashion than a convincing fashion. In this, I guess to kind of clarify, like it's a lot easier to be a bad actor all of the time than a good actor situationally when called for, if you want that kind of social cloud of war surrounding you, or fog of war, excuse me.
Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around what you just said.
Well, okay, think about Donald Trump, right? Like Donald Trump, the reason why he kind of can act as a Rorschach blot on a national stage is because there's no sincere persona.
Okay.
Everything is facades. So the public can look at it and just kind of take away the parts that they want to be true and think that's the true part and the other part he's bullshitting.
But so how do...
and with Withnail, like anytime he's socially engaging with anyone who's not I, and even a lot of times when he is engaging with I,
yeah, even with I,
he doesn't have a convincing persona. You know, like I guess like what we would call sincerity or...
He's a psychopath.
Psychopaths can have incredibly convincing. So I guess like psychopaths, there's a range. He's not an emotionally intelligent psychopath, I guess. Because like a very emotionally intelligent psychopath, like Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was an incredibly emotionally intelligent psychopath. And he could be the most down-to-earth, aw shucks, convincing, like, you'd think like, oh, he's a great dad, and he's like this, that, and the other thing when he was on stage. In America, literally, like, America thought he was a sincere, heartfelt guy who just loved being a dad. And, that's why the Cosby Show was so popular for 12 years. Come to find out, he basically has the psychological profile of a serial killer. And if he hadn't gotten away with raping people for so long, he probably would have started killing people, because that's how that need mechanism works. So there's like a range about, and granted, like I went down a Wikipedia wormhole about serial killers after I watched that TV show Hannibal. So a lot of this is just kind of secondhand Wikipedia and like FBI documents, which is not to say that, like, I mean, there are a lot of psychopaths where they just literally shoot themselves in the foot. Like, most psychopaths are not functional in society at all. The ones who can become functional in society, then it gets really dangerous. Withnail is just sort of like, he doesn't have any ambition, right?
I mean, I think that,
like, if he actually wanted to do things,
right,
he'd probably be more of a monster than he was. And I think on some level, maybe the subtext is he realizes he's a terrible person, and he's consciously trying to limit himself to limit the damage he can do, which is not unheard. Like, there's a lot of cases with serial killers where they'll turn themselves into the police and say, like, please put me away. I did this. I'm going to do this other thing. I don't have any self-control. And in some cases, like, the police just laugh them out of the police station. I mean, and I guess to be fair about that too, like, whenever there's any kind of well-publicized serial killer case or anything like that, the police usually get anywhere from dozens to hundreds of fake confessions, because there are certain people where they want that attention more than they want to exist freely in society.
So has Withnail effectively been going into the police department saying, I'm the killer, I'm the killer?
I mean, that's basically what he's doing when he's driving drunk down that road with one of his taillights literally, or his headlights literally missing.
Mm-hmm.
I take back, I don't actually think he's a psychopath. Most of his destructive behavior is like directed inwardly, like through the alcoholism. That stuff, like, you can't, like, it can't go, like, you can't be that far down and not have it affect other people, obviously.
Yeah,
but
he's willing to have his best friend get molested by his uncle so that he can get a good night's sleep, because he wants to sleep off all the drinking he had. I mean, that's not nothing.
I don't know if he necessarily, like, I just feel like he's,
I mean, it seemed
oblivious.
pretty obvious. Like, as soon as the three of them are in the cabin, like, Uncle Monty wants to jump Eye's bones. Withnail wants to say whatever he's going to make whoever happy and keep him supplied with booze and food. And then, like,
so you think he knew plain well that Monty was, like, going to attempt to rape him?
Maybe this was when you were in the bathroom, but, like, literally Eye pulls aside Withnail when they're in a field, and he's like, all right, I need to sleep in the room with the locks on the doors.
Yeah.
You're on. And, like, Withnail literally walks in while, like, Monty is basically, like, starting to fondle Eye.
I just wasn't sure, like, I wasn't sure if it was, like, denial. Like, I don't know. I couldn't quite.
No, I think he just cared more about his own comfort than his friend getting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm unsure about that. It was definitely, no matter what, it was, like, awful, and definitely, like, the friendship needed to end after that, or whatever it was. The complicated clusterfuck of.
What's the open question?
I feel like the open question is kind of like, how deliberately did Withnail kind of let his uncle just attempt to rape his friend? Like, did he?
Well, he was going to leave him to get gored by a fucking bull. Like, there's no ambiguity here. There's no
true. He did jump over the thing. That was one of the funniest, not the funniest, but, like, that was one of the most interesting, like, moments.
He respects Eye because he recognizes that he's not a fully functional human being and needs Eye to fulfill certain functions for him. And again, with psychopaths, it's very common to see them work in pairs. Because of that, and the other person in the pair is usually a person who's depressed and unassertive. The Columbine killers, that was the dynamic. I think Eric was the one who was the outright psychopath, and the other guy was depressed and directionless.
Yeah.
Leopold and Leb, Paul and Karen Hormolka, for any Canadians that are listening. Or no, Karen Hormolka and Paul Bernardo, excuse me.
Were they? Were they?
Oh, they're probably the most famous or infamous serial killers to come out of Canada. They were a husband and wife. The wife would help to abduct young women, and then Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Perfect example of this. Epstein is a classic psychopath. Maxwell is a classic codependent person with low self-esteem.
How do you get that?
Because of her relationship with her father, Robert Maxwell, and how that tends to have, I was reading a lot of biographical information about her.
Okay.
And it sounds like, yeah, she's sort of like her father, for those who have not been following the UK tabloid press, was a guy named Robert Maxwell, who may or may not have been a Mossad agent. But he was incredibly wealthy and owned a lot of newspapers and various. He owned 2000 AD magazine at one point, which means more to me, I think, than to most people. But that's like the biggest sci-fi comic book publication probably in Europe, except for maybe heavy metal. No, I think 2000 AD actually has a bigger circulation than heavy metal. But her entire attraction to Epstein was basically Epstein. Epstein mirrors the high-functioning sociopathic, psychopathic tendencies of her father, as best as I understand it.
It was very far from Withnail and I's relationship.
Yeah, that's like a very, I guess, like you look at the bigger iteration or the bigger, more dramatic iteration of a psychological or social phenomena, because it's like the best equivalent of like using a microscope on an organism or something that we have at the moment, unfortunately. So I'm talking a lot.
No, it's fine.
So this was Grant's first movie, I think.
Was this Grant's first movie?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, this was definitely, so the guy who directed this acted in a lot of other movies, and he was primarily known as an actor. I think the only other film that he directed that I'd heard of
We're not talking about the director, we're talking about Richard E. Grant.
Right. I'm just trying to think, because like it would be really interesting to see how this was financed, because that would tell us like a lot about why they made the choices they made, right? Because like putting the three of them out in the country was probably a budgetary measure.
I don't know. That's like the entire plot, though. I feel like that's like. I mean, I think that the like going out to the countryside was kind of a central like thing, because like it's kind of the idea of like, I need to get out, I need to like go elsewhere to like escape these problems. And again, like the only one who actually really like showed like some kind of development or evolution by the end of the film was the protagonist, like, and Withnail came back around to the same spot.
Right, and I guess there's like two major like parallel kind of thematic structures in the movie that are supposed to, or at least two that I picked up on, that were supposed to imply like a heavy contrast between things. There's when Monty gives the heartfelt speech after he almost sexually assaults I about like, I've been miserable all these years because I was in denial about myself, is clearly supposed to be a parallel with the fact that he's in denial about his alcoholism. And the escaping to the country thing is supposed to be a parallel to the fact that the actual thing he's trying to escape is Withnail and or the alcoholism. Right, it's like a fake, like, oh, we can change who we are fundamentally by changing scenery, and of course that never. I mean, it worked in my case. I just like moved and wasn't drinking much, but results may vary.
I think sometimes it works depending on.
Although I also went by myself, so it wasn't like, I wasn't taking around my drinking buddy with me. It's like, oh, we're gonna do this together, right? And I think that's like a big theme in alcoholism movies too. Like Days of Wine and Roses, the primary thing going on in the movie is like, what is it? Jack Lemmon. Jack Lemmon seems to come up a lot on this show. I approve, but. And he's great in that movie, Days, if you never saw it. But like, yeah, him and his wife both become alcoholics together because they like are enjoying partying. And he's the one who's drinking first. And then eventually, like, he quits drinking and she can't quit drinking. And then she ends up in a mental hospital.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the codependency and alcoholism tend to, I don't want to say peanut butter and jelly, but you know where I'm going with this. Like there, or maybe you don't. I don't know. But yeah, codependent psychological tendencies and alcoholism. I don't know the actual statistics, but I'm pretty sure there's a pretty high correlation.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes through a lot in like the other great like buddy film about alcoholism. I can think of the whole shooting match by Eagle Pinnell, which was the reason why they started the Sundance Film Festival.
Okay.
That's another movie that's well worth looking up, like made for no money in Texas in 1977. But same kind of basic premise. Two guys can't stop drinking, hatch up like dumb schemes. The schemes backfire on them. Unlike this movie, the guy who made the whole shooting match was such an alcoholic, he literally didn't realize he was an alcoholic until at the first Sundance, Roger Ebert walked up to him and said, "You realize you made a movie about alcoholism, right?" He's like, "Oh, wow, that's deep, kid." You know, because, of course, Roger Ebert was a lot younger back then. So it's like 1978, I think.
Sundance?
I think so, or at least that's when the whole shooting match was released, which I can't imagine it was released in much of any capacity before the Sundance Festival started.
Oh, I thought Sundance didn't start for another 20 years. So.
No, Sundance, pretty sure, yeah, because like Robert Redford saw this movie in like a tiny cinema and was like, "Oh, I want to make a festival that's movies like the whole shooting match," and then he
wow,
did it.
August 1978. Damn. Where I thought it was something that just started up in the, I guess I was thinking late 80s.
Yeah, I don't think it was like huge until the late. It wasn't like the Kingmaker that it became until the late 80s.
Okay.
But
yeah, I didn't realize that had been there for that long.
Yeah, and like I saw a lot of parallels with it. Although, granted, the other movie, it's like in Texas, so it's sort of more. Everything's a lot more muted emotionally, I think.
I thought everything was bigger in Texas.
The objects are bigger. The people are like fairly reserved.
Okay.
Or at least in that movie, they're fairly reserved and quiet.
Do you have any other thoughts about this movie? We're at the. Do you have any more thoughts stage?
Okay.
Speak now.
Not particularly. Although I will say, like the cake bakery scene is like one of the best scenes in the movie. No, it's just like, well, I can't give away too much
because
people
watching the movie, most of the people listening to the podcasts, if they saw the movie, they might have seen it a while ago. Like a refresher is always good. We also like there's a giant thing at the top of our website that says like we're here to spoil the movie. This is like the in-depth discussion after you've seen the movie.
Oh, okay. So
like you don't have to worry about holding details back.
No, it's just like hilarious. It's just like.
But like just describe it a little bit, I guess.
Okay. Well, I don't have to if I don't want to. I'm just gonna say it's hilarious.
Well, if you don't do it, I'm going to.
Okay. All right. Fine. No, it's just funny. It's like it's one of those things you can't describe it or else it makes it not funny. So.
It's like explaining a joke.
Right. It's like explaining a joke.
Okay.
Okay, so the two of them, they walk into this rural bakery, they ask for cake, and they say that, they bullshit their way, and the place wants to close. They want to close the place, but Withnail and I, they want cake, and they don't get their cake. They don't get to eat it either, and there's a big to-do in the bakery.
And then that was hilarious. The total thing was awesome telling. No, it was so much of it is in Richard E. Grant's performance.
Right. And also the timely arrival of their quote unquote ride after proclaiming that they were millionaires. So good.
So I guess how many question marks do we give this movie? Like, I feel like we should have a rating system that's question mark out of question mark, just to make movies that much more questionable.
I'd give this 3 question marks out of question marks.
Yeah, I feel about the same. How many question marks would you give it out of an indeterminate number of question marks?
I can't answer that question without knowing what that means.
Basically just saying pick a number, any number.
No, this is very precise. We just don't know what it's precise out of.
I'll give it 2.
You're wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Interesting. Okay.
So I guess 3 question marks from Ron and I, and 2 question marks from Elizabeth, and that's out of a secret number of question marks. So secret we don't even know. It's like in an envelope somewhere.
We don't even know where the envelope is.
It's like on the top of a hill, and whoever finds it gets $1.75 a gallon gas.
That's a nominee for you.
Right. Right. I did not graduate from one of Canada's finest business schools.
No. That's why you don't know the number of question marks.
Right.
Cool.
Do you have any final thoughts, Ron?
No. That was it.
That was it?
Yeah.
All right. I guess this is
Oh, well, I should add that a friend of mine has just got a kitty, a little kitten, who's 10 weeks old and is named Withnail or Withnail. So that's a really important thing to know. There's sort of that ties up the movie in a ribbon.
So cute.
Very, very dramatic. Very, very dramatic.
Aww.
All right. Okay, that was my last contribution.
But yeah, so I guess Elizabeth is our cult British cinema correspondent, because it seems like most of the times when she comes on, we watch something that's cult, something that came out of the UK, something from the 80s.
That seems right.
Elizabeth, when we're watching The Prisoner?
Right, The Prisoner, God. Yeah.
All 7 episodes?
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever.
All right. Yeah, we're finishing up Deadwood now. I guess we could do a TV roundup.
I'm the only one who ever wants to watch Deadwood. I don't understand.
Well, it's because the weather got good, and and also I've been playing video games.
The weather got good, so you were like, "Oh, I'm gonna go play video games."
Yeah, isn't that?
How does that make any sense? Also, all the weather-related things we've been doing have been during the day.
How many question marks do you give my statement out of an indeterminate number?
10.
Of question marks?
10 question marks. All right. Wow.
No, yeah, we should finish Deadwood. I guess I kind of got TV'd. I just need to take a quick break from, because I watched so much TV over this quarantine.
That's your problem.
That's a what?
That's Dan's problem. I want to watch TV, and he's like, I watch too much TV. It's because all he does all day is watch TV. I'm like, well, now it's when I want to watch TV at night, you're saying you watch too much TV.
This sounds like a metaphor for something.
You just got to figure out what the metaphor is?
No, I got it figured out. I don't know if...
I don't know. Cheese?
I'll let the listeners at home figure it out.
Okay.
It's a dirty joke. Nine times if I say anything on this show and you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? Just it's probably a dick joke.
Okay. All right. Just assume it. I should just
assume.
I should just assume that if you're making a joke, it's a dirty joke.
Yeah, basically.
And on that note.
All right. So this has been Anomaly Questionable Movies. I'm still Dan.
And I'm still Ron.
I'm still Elizabeth.
And we'll be here next week with, I guess, I don't know. We haven't figured that maybe we got Scott Barley's coming on the show at some point soon. We got a few other guests, but we also have a bunch of movies that we want to watch that, don't really necessarily work with the guest format. So
except Elizabeth, but she's a podcast.
Right. And Elizabeth, she's a guest on the podcast, but she's in her own home while she does it. So she's half guest. Well, I guess all the guests we've had have been in their own homes because of the pandemic, but
we haven't been interviewing Elizabeth.
Right. Elizabeth was not involved in the production of this movie.
Right. Elizabeth, would you like to be involved in the production of a movie so that we can then interview you as the filmmaker?
That'd be fun.
All right. You think you'll be doing that anytime soon?
I'll have to sit on it.
She has a camera.
There you go.
She has a nice camera. She has everything she needs to shoot a movie except for the desire to.
Yeah, so do I. It's a supercomputer that is always in my pocket.
Oh yeah, she got 2 cameras then.
Yeah.
She could do it sitcom style.
None of us have any excuse not to make a movie. Actually, no.
But I'm with now, so.
You're with Withnail?
There's a lot of drinking to do.
Wait, you are Withnail or you're with Withnail?
I'm Withnail.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Well, actually, no, Dan's Withnail.
I'm Monty. I'm old, I'm fat.
No,
I'm creepy.
you're not a rapist or an almost rapist.
Yeah, okay. That's one thing I do want to talk about. So that whole scene.
Oh my God, we just finished.
Okay.
No, it's okay. Go for it.
I don't know. Yeah, there's just like a lot to unpack there because it's like, okay, it's trying to be sympathetic to this guy because he's been in the closet for forever, but the only way that it can figure out to make us sympathetic to him is
I don't think it was trying to be sympathetic to him.
I thought that's what the scene was like, trying to shift tones from like, oh, it's this
No.
broad comedy about this guy getting buggered, and then like it's this really intense moment about this man who's been forced to live a lie because it's like it's society's crime, not ours.
I think he was just being manipulative. I think that he didn't. I think he wanted to be able to tell himself that the protagonist consented, even though it wasn't going to be consent. Like, he wanted to tell himself that it was okay.
But he only said that once he decided he wasn't going to sleep with them, right? I says like, oh, Withnail and I have been in a intense relationship for 6 years. And when he says that, the uncle is like, oh, I don't want to ruin the sanctity of love or whatever, or you guys go sleep together, or suddenly I'm going to be hands off with you all of a sudden because I went through this trauma. And that, like, on the one hand, I think you're definitely correct that, like, the reason he was thinking that way was to convince himself that I secretly wanted it. But I also think
also to make himself feel like it wasn't deeply immoral. Like,
but it's also one of the only times that the film explicitly discusses homosexuality, I think, in any kind of way that's not just sort of like, why are these men sharing breakfast together past a certain age, or I'm going to get buggered.
I mean, I don't think that it needs to directly discuss, like, I don't know.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, it stands out within the film, so it takes this extra weight, and also the fact that we're getting this, like, intensely framed close-up. Also, I think the way that the actor chose to play the lines, like, maybe the actor saw a pathos in the lines that the screenwriter didn't.
I don't, like, but, like, what exactly is... So what do you mean?
It just seems weird because, like, okay, the number of films in 1987 that would have somebody saying, like, oh, homosexuality and the taboo around it, that's society's problem, not mine, and have anybody say it, they don't exist. There's basically that movie, at least as far as I can remember. Like, Ron was alive then. Maybe he remembers some other ones. I can't think of anything.
In the 1980s?
The late 1980s, like mid to late 1980s.
Well, maybe that right there is why it's a gold class.
Right, but the thing is that it's tied to... So you have this guy making this very important statement, but then it's tied to all this baggage of the only out gay man in the entire movie is a sexual predator.
Right.
Like, I think there's like some, and also just like the fact that everything that's gay about the movie, I has to disavow at the end in order to grow up. Like, I think there's like a secret level of, it's like willing to engage with the material, but on some level, I think it is actually homophobic.
Yes, yes.
Itself.
I forgot earlier that was the one thing I wanted to bring up. I have actually a really hard time with this depiction of homosexuality and the role that it plays. Yeah, homosexuality at the end, it's creepy, and it's something to get rid of.
I don't know. I feel like
even he cuts his hair from being long, which would be, you know, like you could take that as like girliness symbolism or whatever. Although, I mean, that's in a lot of movies, like getting a haircut equals growing up. Like, that's in Ghost World. That's in, I mean, Ghost World's the major one I can think of. But
I think that's a really, like, explicit reading of it, though. Like, I don't know. I feel like...
Because it makes such a point about him being gay. Because there's, like, all those Rainer Werner Fassbinder movies in the 70s where it's like... Because, I mean, Fassbinder was, like, very, you know, just living openly as a gay man because he was in Germany in the 1970s and he's living in this avant-garde art circle. And, you know, he has, like, guys where they do horrible things. They are gay, but it's not explicitly linked together in any way. It's just sort of like when Fassbinder does it, it's just sort of saying, like, it's humanizing in a weird way, because it's not like just saying, oh, okay, I need to explain the gay thing first, like it was the origin story in a superhero movie, then we can start dealing with actual human behavior and whatever. In this movie, I felt like it was... Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's sort of by tying the homosexuality stuff to the alcoholism stuff and having him disavow both and kind of...
how is he disavowing anything? Like, the only thing that he did at the end of the movie was basically like, I need to get away from this person and then like grow up and like start acting. Like, we don't know what he does after that.
There's two specific points in the movie that can be seen as kind of aha moments where I kind of comes out of this hypnotic state and realize, like, what the fuck am I doing with myself? The first one is when Monty has him cornered in the room and is about to sexually assault him. The second one is when he says, I can't be friends with you anymore, Withnail, because I need to go out and live my life and be a productive member of society. It's before that. It's when Withnail's like laughing on the floor and he's just like looking at these two drug dealers and Withnail, and he's kind of like, this is insanity. And I mean, that one doesn't necessarily have a like gay subtext, but the fact that the only thing that can get him to want to leave the country is literally this like, yeah, it kind of goes with that, like, oh, okay, drugs and liquor are going to lead to debauchery and bad things happening to you. One of those bad things is like two dudes having sex with each other.
I don't know. I feel like it's like stuff like that does happen. Like, I know a friend. Okay, I should not.
Oh no, I've had dudes hit on me in a very creepy way before, but I wouldn't make that a centerpiece of my movie if I was trying to talk about alcoholism, unless I saw them as somehow inextricably linked.
Yeah, I guess maybe the framing is the issue. I mean, I guess I never read it as like, because I always read their relationship as being more meaningful, I think, than perhaps other people did, but like not explicitly because like, oh, he realized that this was bad. This was like, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely like it's a good point. I'll have to think about that because like, I mean, like the uncle is definitely like a very like villainous sort of predatory character, and yeah. I don't know. I don't have anything else meaningful to add.
The actual gay guy was the villain.
Right. And I mean, I think it also reframes like it's society's crime, not ours, because at the end, I comes to some kind of like personal growth by embracing society.
Mm-hmm. Such as by cutting his hair.
He cuts his hair. He shows up to work. He's not going to get drunk anymore. He's not going to live in a flop house anymore. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not totally convinced that, never mind. No, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
All right. Well, now that we've made this into the happy movie that it is.
Right.
Right. It's like, I mean, yeah, like there wasn't a lot of space to read like happiness into the movie to begin with, so.
No, and we just eliminated it. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on that note, then.
All right. So, should we do a sign off again, or?
Yeah, take two.
Okay, take two. So this has been Dan.
And this has been Ron.
This has been Elizabeth.
This has been A Nominee Questionable Movies. We'll see you next week.
All right, take care, everyone.